This is a very great opportunity for our school to invite Mr. Ben Nelson, and we've been having a very close partnership with Minerva, and we have successfully implemented Mbacc program, and we are proud to have our first fruit of the program. And I'll be asking some critical questions for the Mbacc program. So. First, Mr. Ben Nelson. So, just to start, what inspired you to create the Mineruba Baccalaureate program? And what educational challenges are you hoping to address through it?
So, when I started Minerva overall, I built the university initially to serve as a beacon, as a signal to other educational institutions on what the future of education should be all about. And over the years, we've seen Minerva University not only become recognized as the best university in the world, but also beginning to influence other universities in reforming their program of study. We've always had the vision that secondary and post-secondary education are linked. What happens in elementary school is very different than what happens in high school. But what happens in high school should directly lead to what happens at a university. Mm-hmm. And reforming high school education isn't really as simple as building programs for each individual school. There are too many schools, it takes too long. It's not a process that's efficient, and it's not something where a high school has the resources to develop their own brand new approach to curriculum. And so a few years ago, we had an opportunity that presented itself to us from a funder to build a high school program that we could then roll out all over the world. And even though we weren't expecting to launch our high school program for a number of years, we decided that it was during the pandemic, and we decided that it was a good opportunity for us to try. And so we built the program initially, we piloted it remotely during the pandemic in the United States. And then we brought it the following year here to Korea. And this is where we met GIA and really worked with you to launch the program in full. And now we have the first graduating class from the program all these years later. So it was a way to bring the Minerva philosophy to high schools all over the world with the same type of approach of learning systematic thinking as opposed to just learning a subject, passing a test, and then forgetting everything you've learned.
Great. Okay. On that regard, can we expect you to make a middle school program or elementary or even kindergarten program to expand your idea?
Well, at some point we may go down to that level. There are elements in middle school that are similar to high school, and therefore especially in later middle school, there may be some ramp-on courses that we put together. Elementary school is a very different approach. Now, we may come up with an elementary school program in the future, but it's very far away, so nothing imminent.
Thank you. Okay, so how does the Minerva Baccalaureate program fit into your broader vision for transforming education?
So for us, in many ways, high school is the great equalizer all over the world. When you get to higher education, different students pursue very different tracks. Sometimes they don't pursue university at all. Sometimes they pursue vocations at higher education that don't allow themselves to really shape their mind and how they think systematically. But really, every student goes through a high school experience. And that is an opportunity for us to have very widespread impact. Now, that's important because we're all participating in modern society. And modern society is changing at an extraordinarily rapid rate. And our current schooling system is simply not preparing citizens all over the world to deal with the modern world. And really, that's what the Mbacc is all about. It provides students tools to be able to navigate, to understand, to make sense, to problem solve. And that's the kind of education we want to make sure that students all over the world are exposed to.
Great. On that note, in what ways does the Mineruba Baccalaureate differ from traditional secondary education programs such as the IB or the AP?
Yeah. So if you look at traditional high school programs, be they English language like the AP, the IB, the Cambridge A levels, or national curricula from countries, various parts of the world, the French baccalaureate, etc., they really are all the exact same program. There's no difference between them at all. You take a course is in a subject matter. At the end of that course, whether it's at the end of a year or at the end of a whole program, you sit for a centrally administered test, you get a score on the test, and you move on. Right? And that's what the entire world of secondary education is as far as the core programs go. Now, if you look at what is happening at the very best schools in the United States, none of them use any of those frameworks. They don't exist. They've rejected the AP, they don't use the IB, they certainly don't use the Cambridge A level. What they do is they engage students in what is known as authentic learning, right, and authentic assessments. They engage students in being able to interrogate subject matter, to be able to interpret it, and to understand how subject matters are actually come to be. What the Mbacc does is it takes that philosophy, but takes it a step further. So rather than accepting that you can teach these subjects even in an effective way, even when you interrogate them, what we do is we draw the connections between the subjects, such that when you study something in language arts, you can then see how the same principles apply in science, and how the same principles in math can apply in history, and how they can all apply to your own personal growth. And that is really the core of what an education should be. Not something which is episodic and driven to a test, but instead something which you internalize and that helps you grow as a person. And so it takes the kind of education that's found at the very best schools in the world, the Phillips Exeters of the world, etc., and then it improves upon that further. And it's the first time that an education like that has been accessible to students anywhere in the world, and it's also the first time that an elite private school type of education has ever been upgraded.
Yeah, on that note, let's dive a little bit deeper into the curriculum of the Mineruba Baccalaureate. So how does the program integrate the critical thinking aspect and interdisciplinary learning into its daily instruction?
Yeah, well, I think we have an example here of somebody who's been through the program. And so I'll give you some of the theory behind it, and I'm actually curious to see if you can give some color as an example of what you actually have gone through. Now, one of the key things to understand about integrating critical thinking processes, or really any metacognitive skills or tools, is that introducing them is not the same as understanding them. And understanding them is not the same as being able to apply them or to use them. So in order to be able to do that, you have to be able to not only explain the concept, you not only have to give the student the ability to use that concept, but you have to do it over and over and over again, time after time. And we do it across years. And so we identify several dozen of these core concepts we refer to as cross-disciplinary learning objectives. And they're learning objectives that traverse the entire curriculum. And we then not only measure whether or not a student recalls them, we don't even measure just whether or not a student can use them, but we show how broadly a student can apply them. And through what dimensions of transfer, from subject to subject, from being able to produce their own work to critique somebody else's work, from being able to think deliberatively over a long period of time or spontaneously when they're called on when they're prompted to use something versus when they're not prompted to use something. And we map out how students have progressed along their, not just understanding, but their ability to use what it is that they've learned. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious from your, your own experience, maybe you can share, your journey with a learning objective like that.
Oh, okay. So I think most students can feel me that when it comes to freshman year, you get to introduce those XLOs. You lists of XLOs and seeing what are these, what are those, and there are definitions provided, and it was for me kind of challenging to get used in terms of understanding what those each LOs and XLOs meant. Because in every session we have listed up some XLOs and DLOs, and then teacher.
And DLOs are disciplinary learning objectives.
Yeah. So and the teacher calls up on one student and say, try to apply this kind of XLO in this scenario, in this situation. And in my first freshman year, I had to look at the definition first, and then then it will be applied in this way. But then, as you mentioned, it keep on builds up, and it could be periodically shown up, and then at this moment, I could just naturally feel how those XLO means and actually can be applied to the real world. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really good strategy, because I think most people, those strategies aren't very original and very new itself, because it's just basically hashtag critic or hashtag alternate approaches, self-awareness. These aren't really new ideas, but then the fact that the Mineruba Mbacc program verbalizes the system, and the teacher itself doesn't just learn and then just write that down and memorize it, but then they themselves discusses those concepts. And I think that's a really big strategy and power to actually improve your own and make a really big improvement out of it.
Great.
That's great. Okay, so this question might be something that students and parents might be interested in, but how does the curriculum prepare students for both university level education and rapidly changing the global workforce?
Yeah, in many ways it's one and the same. If you think about what it is that universities desperately want students to come in with, they really don't need a student to come in having already known calculus, because the university can teach you calculus, and in fact they're happy to do it. They don't really need a student to come in having mastered biology, because they'll teach you biology and they're happy to do it. What they need are students that are able to learn autonomously. They need people who are able to look at material, be able to understand that material, and then be able to apply and build on it. They need students that come in that are able to be skeptical about what they read, to be able to evaluate the claims that they may encounter in academic papers and the literature, etc. They need students that are able to problem solve. Right? They need students that are able to be effective at communicating their ideas. All of these things are elements that universities hope students are going to come in with, and they hope that they will teach them. But they don't actually teach any of these things in particular. If you look at a course catalog of a university, you will not see any courses, let alone requirements, that ensure that students learn how to do these things. And so they hope that high schools will provide that. What do high schools do instead? They teach them calculus and biology and things like that, which are all fine to teach, right? But they focus on the subject matter as a goal in and of itself, as opposed to using that subject matter in order to illustrate these broader metacognitive tools. Now, those same tools that are useful as a university student are useful in life, right? Your ability to evaluate a claim is pretty crucial in day-to-day life. Your ability to solve problems is very crucial in day-to-day life. Your ability to work with other people, to communicate your ideas, These are all things that are prerequisites to having a successful life. Yet nowhere in our educational spectrum do we focus on them. And that really is what the Mbacc does.
Impressive. Okay. So in order to enter Mbacc, or let's say a student who has done like traditional education in elementary and middle school, they may struggle in the Mbacc program. So what kind of students do you think thrive in the Mineruba Baccalaureate program, and how does it cater to different learning styles?
Well, this is, I think, in many ways, one of the great things about the Minerva approach. We assume that students are coming into Minerva programs without any background to prepare them for Minerva programs. And it's because we use the same learning objectives that we apply over and over and over again. We therefore enable our students to make mistakes initially, right? It's not the concept that you are exposed to one thing and then you never get back to it again. So if you don't learn it up front, it's over. It's the exact opposite. You condition students, right? Just as you were talking about, in the first year, it's kind of hard. You make a transition. You have to look things up again. But over time, you build intuitions within the student. And the beauty of the approach is that it doesn't really matter what your educational background is. It doesn't really matter what your subject matter interest is. It doesn't really matter if you found certain environments to be more conducive to your learning in the past than others. What Minerva does is it uses the science of learning to ensure that all students are effectively absorbing the information and are able to apply it systematically.